Let's begin the second part of our Chapter 3 study with a bit of a review of some of the information that was contained in Part 1. If you recall, we were talking about the need for accuracy in our writing, and I indicated to you just how important it is that when we write our stories, that we spell names correctly and that we spell them in such a way that we indicate a person by first name, last name, and middle initial. And that helps to ensure that the reader knows the full name of the person that they're reading about. We also spoke about attribution, in other words, letting the reader know the source of the information, the source of where the story comes from. And in doing so, again, we use first name, middle initial, last name. If this person has a title and position that is relevant to the story, then we need to indicate that and understand that in journalistic writing, we try not to vary too much from the standard attribution verb of indicating that someone said something. Not that we say the fire chief says this happened, or the fire chief stated that this is what occurred. No, keep it simple and use the word said. Okay? Good. Now, let's move ahead to another reminder. We mentioned in Chapter 3, Lesson 1, that compound words require hyphens. In other words, take a look at the phrase, Christy's step-siblings are, and there's some punctuation missing here, and that is step-siblings is a compound phrase and should be hyphenated. Let's also talk about word choice, because sometimes the words that we choose don't really mean what we intend for them to. The phrase, Brad inspires to be a reporter, not correct. Brad aspires to be a reporter. Okay, sound alike words, spelled rather closely, but the two words inspires and aspires have two entirely different meanings. So be careful in your word choice. A common error, common mistake that's made when we write in journalistic style is that we like to write in first person, the I rather than the they, second person being you, but we write in third person, not in first person usage. So these are some examples of work that have been submitted in previous sections of this course, and so I've excerpted them here. Look at the one on the top. I asked Christy what the movie is about. This is what she had to say. The I asked Christy not only is incorrect, it's not necessary. Christy said this about the movie, and let the sentence go from there. Second bullet point, as our conversation continued, we delved into, well, again, the we, now we have a second person. We try to avoid that type of usage. I think it's safe to conclude. Well, no, not correct. For one thing, we're relying on an opinion here, and the other is that it's expressed in the first person using the pronoun I. Same thing on the bottom. As for me, I believe. No, we try not to accept that kind of usage, and we ask that you keep it in third person. Now, a whole series of examples here to take a look at. And these are all examples that have been submitted in previous sections of this course. His mother is a Steelers fan. Okay, she is. But is a sentence punctuated correctly? No, it's not. Why use the apostrophe to indicate that she possesses the fan? No. His mother is a Steelers. Steelers is plural, not possessive. And so we simply add the S to Steeler to indicate the correct title of the team. On the other hand, Pikes Peak is not correct. Pikes Peak with an apostrophe is correct. Singular versus plural, okay? This is something that's not easily picked up on, I suspect, unless you proofread your work carefully. So let's look at this sentence, or actually a couple of sentences. Interesting things about Christy include her love for sports. Her brother was a former football player. Well, she's given us one thing to consider, but she indicated that there was more than one thing because she used things in the plural. Interesting things about Christy include her love for sports. How about this? An interesting thing about Christy is her love for sports. Again, small, perhaps changes that don't appear to be all that significant to you, but the fact is that it's incorrect usage, and we want to make certain that we are writing accurately and correctly. We also discussed this in part 1 of the Chapter 3 lesson. In this instance, look at the phrase 18-year-old, because that is a phrase that involves the use of a numerical age. We will hyphenate that phrase so that it looks like this. Okay, how are we doing with this so far? Is it making sense to you? Let's look at some more examples. A good thing to remember when we write journalistically, probably most every profession, regardless of what it is, has its own set of unique terms and phraseology, and perhaps some of these words are used in a very common way as slang or jargon. And it's conversational language, but it really isn't appropriate for journalistic usage. So let's take a look at this phrase, a trip to hook up with agents. Well, no, not really. How about this? A trip to connect with or consult with agents. To hook up with, well, it just doesn't have the right connotation, does it? Some other examples. She is in her second semester at SEMO. Yeah. She's in her second semester at Southeast. There's a link to the University Style Guide on this slide. I'll publish that for you also out on the Moodle calendar page, and I'd like for you to take a look at the University Style Guide. You might be surprised to learn that the university is pretty insistent that in formal writing, which would include journalistic writing, that the university be referred to not as SEMO, but to be referred to as Southeast. And I know that that may be a point, it seems like a nitpicking point to you perhaps, and maybe even one that you don't agree with personally, but I have to ask that you take a look at the style guide and understand that when you write about the university, unless, and there is an exception to this, unless you're writing about university athletic teams, the official way to refer to this university in a shortened form of Southeast Missouri State University is to refer to it as Southeast and not as SEMO. Here's an example of a good reason to proofread your work. He was a simmer and he played? No, I don't think so. We're talking about an athlete here. He was a swimmer and he played some other sport. After a couple of bits, it becomes, no. How about after a couple of bites, it becomes? One of these examples where the spell checker in your word processor is not going to pick up if you intend to write the word bites, but you spell it B-I-T-S, bits. Well, bits is a perfectly acceptable English word as far as your spell checker is concerned, and it's not going to single that out as a misspelling. So that's why it's important that you both spell check your work, and then after you have done that, then you proofread it with your own eyes again. Just a reminder of our friend Rocco Camisso. We mentioned him in Chapter 1. Take a look at the cut line underneath his photograph. He fires people for typos, so we want to make certain that we strive for accuracy. Some more writing examples. Blank is 20 years old from Cape Girardeau. Well, not correctly structured as a sentence, Blank is 20 years old and is from Cape Girardeau. Stevens had this to say. Yes, I. Well, we go back to early in this lesson when we said that the word SAID is the preferred way of indicating attribution. A very simple statement. Stevens said, yes, I. How about this sentence? She's currently working at the Arrow doing copy editing to help her gain experience. Well, the sentence is just a little unwieldy, just awkwardly structured. We can clean that up, make it a shorter, simpler, more direct sentence, which then makes it easier to understand by writing, she's currently working at the Arrow as a copy editor to gain experience. See how much more cleanly it reads when we clean it up like this. What's going on here? Blank is going into the military, which many people do not know. Well, if you read that sentence literally, as it's written, it's suggesting that many people don't know the military. And I would counter that by saying that we can clarify the sentence by writing it this way. Blank is going into the military, a fact that many people do not know. She tried to never let her inner child get away from her. Well, again, short, simple, direct. To never let her inner child get away. From whom else could she let it get away, her inner child, other than from her? So the phrase "from her" totally unnecessary. He plans to be around for a long time to help take care of and raise his nephew, helping his sister. Well, I can assure you the first time that when this sentence was submitted to me, I sat around and scratched my head for a little bit, trying to figure out the meaning of the sentence. And finally, I came up with this. The writer should have written, he plans to be around for a long time to help take care of and raise his nephew by helping his sister. Now the sentence has meaning and clarity, right? Good. I hope you're understanding. She was young at the time, didn't know of what was really going on between our country and hers, and is now blessed to be where she is. Well, again, awkward structure. She was young at the time, didn't know what was really going on between our country and hers, and says she is blessed to be where she is. Or we could say in the past tense, said she is blessed to be where she is. Again, just looking to make certain that the sentence says what we think that it says. We talked about jargon and slang terminology a while ago. Here's an example of a sentence where the word tons is used, and it seems to be that this way as expressing an amount using the word tons, regardless of whether we're talking about an actual weight of 2,000 pounds, which of course is what a ton is. It seems to be taking on something more than just a colloquial meaning, and who knows, over time may actually become accepted. But for right now, this is slang, and we should really try to avoid writing this way. Rather than there are tons of students at Southeast, there are many students at Southeast. So let's be careful about that usage. When asked what she felt people didn't exactly know about her, she stated that she is literally an open book. Well, no. Literally would mean that she is an open book. So she's not literally an open book. Rather, she said that she believed, not felt, but believed that her life is like an open book. Take a look at look at the word believed and look at the phrase her life is like, and contrast those with the word felt in the upper sentence and that she is literally an open book in the upper sentence. We've got two problems in this sentence, and we're just making certain that we understand that the correct words and the correct phraseology was not used in the creation of the sentence at the top. This one always conjured up a pretty interesting mental image to me. She stands under 5 feet. Well, maybe, Do you have this mental image of a person standing there and above her head are 5 feet dangling? I think what she really intends to say correctly is her height is less than 5 feet. She's not actually standing under 5 feet, is she? He served as resident advisor for Missouri Baptist, from which he established multiple friendships with his floor through the enthusiasm of his faith. Well, this is another example of one of those sentences where we probably think we know what the person is saying. They're just not saying it too accurately. Did he have multiple friendships with the floor? I don't think so. Take a look at this wording. He served as resident advisor for Missouri Baptist, a position from which he established multiple friendships with residents through the enthusiasm of his faith. So we get some clarity here by changing the structure of the sentence to read as it does in the second example there. Here's an example of spell checker that perhaps was used, but it still didn't pick up on this error. Can you take a look at the sentence, or at least this portion of the sentence, and tell what's going on here? Okay, something is misspelled. For the last time, have you found it yet? How about this? The difference between LED lead and LEAD lead. LEAD lead, of course, is the mineral that is mined rather profusely in southeast Missouri, by the way, as opposed to LED, which is the past tense of the verb to lead. So, again, another example, spell checkers won't pick up on errors such as this, so be certain that you proofread your work with your own eyes carefully. Again, this is another one of those that conjures up a great image in my mind of Paul swimming through classes. Get out of the way, here comes Paul, he's swimming through classes. No, I don't think that's what's happening. Paul once learned how to swim by taking swimming lessons. Now that seems pretty clear and possible to me. I don't think it's possible for Paul to swim through his classes. So, part 2 is considerably briefer in length than part 1 of chapter 3's lecture. Let's bring things to a conclusion by talking about the importance of using your spell checker, but at the same time recognizing the fact that the spell checker is not always going to pick up on incorrect spellings in your writing. So yes, use your spell checker, but don't make that mistake of thinking that that's the only type of proofreading that your work requires. So if we end on this slide, does it make a good point? I hope so. Hey, thanks for your attention. We're making good progress. Don't forget to be taking a look now at the instructions for your news story writing assignment. Again, this is where you're the reporter for the Post-Dispatch in St. Louis, and you're investigating that mysterious death of an 18-year-old prostitute. And the assignment, of course, is to write a story, a news story in journalism style for the Post-Dispatch. I've given you a set of quotations from a number of people who have some type of involvement in this story. And listen carefully, please. One of the objectives of this exercise is for you to use what you've learned about news values and to apply that knowledge in your judgment of what are the important facts in this story, which of the facts that you have been given are not necessarily that important and don't need to be included in the story, and what's going to be the information out of all that you've been given there that needs to appear in the lead sentence and then also in the lead paragraph. Think carefully about that lead sentence. What is the single most important fact in this story? And use that to pardon me, the telephone seems to be ringing. And then use that to lead your story. So that's the end of part 2 of chapter 3. I'll see you in chapter 4. Take care.